A failed engine, a daring plan, and an escape against all odds. You have to hear this story. In 1972, three friends from America, Mike, May, and Paul, decided to undertake an adventure. The trio sailed from California to Mazatlan in Mexico on a small and inexpensive boat. During the journey, the engine of the boat began to fail, putting their plans at risk. While in Mazatlan, they realized hashish was very cheap compared to America. They bought some from a taxi driver and came up with a scheme. Buy more hashish, return to America, sell it, and with the money obtained fix their boat and continue their adventure. So they asked the taxi driver to assist them in buying a larger quantity. They piled into the taxi and the driver took them up a bumpy mountain road, far from the city. Then a guy with a donkey loaded up with hashish approached them when the taxi stopped. Not knowing what was really going on, it became clear to the friends that this driver thought they wanted a huge block of hashish, and they only had $300 to spend. They handed over the $300, received 6 bags of hashish, and after a tense argument, showing their empty pockets, got away from the men. With no other choice, the friends set off to walk toward their boat, each with 2 bags. Nervously, they continued and were able to pass a policeman without being stopped. After they finally reached their boat, the hashish was cleaned, and they estimated it weighed about 10 kilograms. Realizing that they needed to hide it before going back to the US, they remembered hearing about how hashish could be hidden inside surfboards. They were both into surfing and so had tools and experience in handling them. One board was hollowed out, filled with hashish and perfectly restored. However, their boat engine failed, making it unsafe to sail. In the process of seeking assistance, they met 2 brothers from America, Frank and Dan, who gave them a lift back to the US. Out of great joy, the friends planned to carry the hashish that was hidden. Little did they know that the brothers belonged to big smuggling cartels, with their seaboat carrying a ton of hashish to make huge profits. Seeing the friends sitting and enjoying the hashish, the brothers revealed that they were smuggling a ton of it and needed their help. They wanted the friends to assist in sailing and transporting the hashish in America. They were much shocked by that amount, as 10 kilos seemed too much for them. They realized the danger of severe punishment if caught. Frank offered them $10,000 each if they would help him sail this cargo to America. They all agreed. The 5 set off, avoiding Coast Guard patrols. After a week at sea, disaster struck again. A boom in the boat shifted during the night, and they hit something, started sinking, and the friends found themselves swimming in the sea. They swam to shore exhausted. In the morning, they were disappointed to see the hashish bags washed up with them. Fearing arrest, they buried the bags quickly. As the villagers approached, Frank and Mike kept them at bay while the others finished burying the hashish. They quickly covered the hashish bags with sand and branches. Any passerby could see them. They felt they had not collected all the bags. Frank, in broken Spanish, asked the villagers to take them to the nearest town. Their boat had sunk. The villagers agreed. They used a small truck. 5 got into the open pickup bed and pulled out into the early morning light, feeling relieved. The truck came to a sudden halt, and the sound of an oncoming car could be heard. Armed police patrolmen then appeared and made the friends surrender. They were taken to the station and forced to sign confessions in Spanish. They were then put into a very strict, extremely overcrowded prison. The friends stuck together, got through a difficult first night, and began to plan an escape, hoping to find security gaps in the chaotic prison. The first thing they noticed was that the facility had 2 walls, an inner wall topped with sharp glass and an outer wall patrolled by armed guards. This ruled out climbing over them, so they would have to dig a tunnel. The ground was concrete, not earth. Difficulty occurred here, but the movie The Great Escape, where prisoners escaped through a tunnel, provided inspiration. Their task was many, starting with breaking the concrete floor. They needed tools, and Mike managed to snatch a small stone from workers. They bought a butter knife from another inmate to use with the stone. The best place to dig was near the wall. They moved a bed, marked the spot, and set up a makeshift tent to cover the digging. They took turns to dig and keep watch. It was slow, tiring, and took 6 weeks to get a hole, but under the concrete, the ground was soft and full of water. No dry soil appeared. They had tried for 3 days to dry the mud, but didn't succeed. In despair, they covered the hole and turned themselves in. Time crawled by in the unemployed, activity-free prison. Lots of prisoners were on drugs openly. The 5 friends kept themselves occupied by marching around the prison yard, staying away from dangerous drugs, and fighting to keep their sanity. The lack of purpose made things much harder. 5 months dragged by with no end in sight. As a result of the communication problem, the friends did not talk to the officials. One day, the prison's water supply stopped due to a huge leak, rendering all the toilets and bathrooms useless. After some days, Mike remembered the hole that they had dug, suspecting that the ground could be dry by now. They checked and found that instead of the wet mud, the ground was dry, which informed them that the broken pipe was the cause of the wet ground. Excited, they started digging again. With a plastic bucket, they dug vertically a meter down very fast, and then began the horizontal tunnel. The soil became hard, and it was slow, but their determination kept them going. They had to hide the soil that was extracted, so they decided to hide the removed material under their beds, even though inspections were often conducted there. The digging was done in shifts, the one digging and the other removing the soil. In a week, they dug 3 to 4 meters. While digging, Paul hit and broke a sewer pipe. The smell was immediately noticeable. Mike asked Paul, "What's wrong?" Paul replied, "I hit a sewer pipe and its leakage is coming into the tunnel." It smelled so bad and they couldn't clean the muck out because dumping it in the toilets would bring it back through the burst pipe. The tunnel had been fouled by sewage from the main pipe, making their situation worse. The tunnel soon began to fill up with waste, so they had to repair the broken pipe to stop more sewage from flowing and avoid detection. If the smell spread, guards would investigate, exposing them. None of the 5 wanted to fix the pipe themselves, so they recruited an American prisoner named Benny. But Benny didn't want to. Frank offered him money and more weed than he'd ever seen. Benny agreed unwillingly. They got some cement powder, mixed it with water, and gave it to Benny. Benny held his breath and, taking the cement paste mixture with him, entered the tunnel, sealed the pipe, and cleaned as much of the waste as possible. He came out dirty and said, "It's fixed." They accepted him as their 6th member. After a few days, they continued digging in shifts. They dug 18 hours a day to ensure that they could complete it quickly. The tunnel was 6 meters, surpassing the inner wall. Mike used a modified flute to see that they were near the surface and the outer wall. They again pushed harder, desperate to escape. As they were nearing the end of the tunnel, Frank and Dan prepared for their breakout. With Dan's contact in Mexico, he ensured that 2 getaway cars would be parked off the prison yard. Their breakout was to occur on the 3rd night, for which the cars would have already been parked. With renewed enthusiasm, they worked diligently to finish it on time. The next day, it rained heavily, causing big leaks from the viewing hole into the tunnel. It might flood. The man inside fled out quickly and told the others. They were afraid the tunnel would collapse, but amazingly, the next morning it held. When it stopped raining, the tunnel was found to be in one piece, but it was wet. They took out the water and went back to digging, determined to get out that night. Working in shifts until 2 a.m., they reached what they thought was beyond the outer wall. They got into line in the tunnel, putting their clothes on inside out to look cleaner when they emerged on the other side. Mike crawled first, protecting himself with a mask to break through at the end of the tunnel. After 15 minutes, he created an opening, but soon realized the prison lights were directly above. If they emerged now, they'd be easily spotted by any guard or passerby. Mike's friends asked if anyone was around. He said it looked empty. They decided there was no turning back. Mike climbed out first, followed by his friends. They laid flat on the ground behind the wall to stay out of sight. All 6 were now outside the tunnel. Mike peeked around the corner and saw they had to walk past the main gate to reach the street. They remembered what had happened with the hashish and walked casually to appear like they belonged there. They were wearing their clothes inside out to appear clean. The prison was in a residential area, so they hoped guards would think they were just ordinary people. They walked quietly past the prison and then started running. They trailed to the pickup point, but the cars were not there. Dan then talked of a second location along the tracks. They ran to the place and waited. A little while later, they saw 2 cars coming their way. Dan said that it was his friends. They were overjoyed. They split into 2 groups, where each group took a car. Benny got off later and received his hashish reward. The brothers, wanted in the US, remained in Mexico. The 3 friends entered the US once more by crossing the land border with their passports. How would you feel during this kind of wild adventure? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up. Also, take a second to subscribe for more amazing stories.